The movement was begun by a scientist who discovered, quite by accident, these signals being sent. Please understand, they are safe as long as they are not discovered.
They want their weapon.
You have to wake yourself up.
Lookoutfa Charlie.
I want that son of a bitch dead. I want him dead.
You know, it seems like every 10 or 20 years they've got to dig David Berkowitz up and try to make some money off him. And once again, in 2021, a mini series / documentary was released on Netflix called The Sons of Sam, A Descent into Darkness. And what's awesome about this one is that it's mainly about Maury Terry, who was a guy that realized that there was something not quite right about the whole Berkowitz / Son of Sam case, and he knew something was wrong. And this guy got his hooks into it and just dug and dug and dug and would not let go. And for that reason alone, it's a great documentary to watch, because we need guys like Maury Terry out there. We need more guys like Maury Terry out there. The guy was awesome. And he was so close to figuring this out. He really was. If he would have had his thumb on the pulse of the technology that was at work at that present time, which I don't really even know if there was a way of knowing that or not yet, because it was really available in 1974. If he had known about the technology at work, he would have blown this wide open. But he didn't know, and that's why he ended up so close, and that's why it almost ended up driving him over the edge. You know, and I don't mean that in a bad way or that he was driven crazy. He was just kind of broken after that because he was so goddamn close. But praise Maury Terry, man, for real. The guy was just on it and would not stop. I want to finish this for Maury Terry. I'm not going to guess at what happened to David Berkowitz. I'm going to tell you what happened to David Berkowitz. And what you have to realize is that in 1977, that was right around the time that the church committee hearings were happening. All that shit with MKUltra was going down. And you have to understand that the American government was actively seeking ways to make people Manchurian candidates. One way that they were figuring out how to do this was through sound weapons, EMF, ELF, electromagnetic weapons. This is what they were using on people. Now, it was available in the 60s and even before that, but they had perfected it, really perfected it in 1974. And after that, you've just gotten used to it. This is the beginning of the head scratcher cases. Something doesn't seem quite right. There isn't a motive. The guy was, okay, maybe a little weird before that. Maybe they used some drugs. Maybe they didn't. Butch DeFeo, Amityville, that was the same thing. David Berkowitz, same thing. And now they use it all the time. All the time. There isn't a period that goes by, not even a year, where you don't hear about a case where these weapons have been used on people. And you have to understand that David Berkowitz was a beta test. He was a beta test to see how they could play these scripts on people and get it to work and get them out murdering, and then to steer them in a direction to murder people that they wanted. If they wanted just random young people to create chaos. Now it happens all the time. Think about it. Use your head. This is what they're doing. This is what they've been doing. And I'm going to prove it to you. There's an interesting quote from David Berkowitz that I want to read. He said, "I see that people will never understand where I come from. No matter how much I try to explain it, they wouldn't understand what it was like to walk in darkness." That says a lot. What it mainly talks about is when he's talking about the dog Harvey and the barking and the audio that was riding on the barking. The dog wasn't really talking to him. He didn't believe that. He said it a million times. There's all this bullshit information that are sold as facts in the David Berkowitz case that just aren't true. He started to go through audio and visual hallucinations. That's what he thinks they were. What would David Berkowitz go through in a situation like that? Well, audio, he would hear footsteps on the roof, footsteps on the ceiling, cracking sounds within the walls, cracking sounds above you, cracking sounds below you. In 77, you would think it was paranormal or demonic. You would hear scratching and thumping in the walls, distortion of your television or your radio, or transmissions coming through your television or your radio. Your electrical system would be playing tricks on you through the EMPs that are being sent through his electrical system, probably from his meter forth, because it was totally different then. They actually had to kind of set up an operation to where they don't have to do that anymore. It's the same technology overall, but they can do it long distance. Secondly, you have an address on your fucking power meter now. It's basically an IP address. They can send it wirelessly from thousands of miles away. But that's what he would be going through. These distortions and warpage. And he had been doing things that put him on the radar. For one, he was in the military. 2, he was a postal worker, government job. 3, he was fooling around with LSD and Satanism. That is a perfect mixture of on the radar and things to be put in a mind control program. You're messing with Satan, he's going to believe it's demons when we start fucking with him, and he still does. These are things now that are on haunted house shows, right? And these are things that quote-unquote TIs and people that are targeted with this technology deal with all the time now. This isn't something new or insane. This is something that people are dealing with all the time, and most people don't even realize it. Now, who could be possibly hit with this technology in our popular culture? Well, let me think about it. Before I start slamming down information, I want to show you Wired Magazine shows an article, Army yanks voice-to-skull devices site. The Army's very strange webpage on voice-to-skull weapons has been removed. It was strange it was there, and it's even stranger it's gone. If you Google it, you'll see the entry for voice-to-skull device, but if you click on the website, the link is dead. The entry still available on the Federation of American Scientists. So there you go. I want to show you that from Wired Magazine. Not from some off-the-grid news outlet. Wired Magazine is showing you this. This video is for people that don't know about this stuff. I want you to see this, and then I'm going to start going through popular culture right now. Another thing that I want to point out is that it doesn't have to be voice to skull. It doesn't have to be in somebody's skull. It can be in your vicinity. People believe that these sounds are coming from their walls, from their ceilings, from their attics, from their roofs, from outside, from all different angles. And it can be anything from people talking to scary, spooky sounds to all these different things. And most people believe that it's paranormal, and they hide it in the paranormal, the UFO, alien culture, all those different fringe cultures. It's hidden within. And they get people believing that it is, and they can hide this technology. They have been conditioning people and doing this for years, decades and decades. I'm willing to bet that the people out there don't know how often this has happened in popular culture in our recent times. This is the Naval Yard shooter, Aaron Alexis, the guy that shot up the Navy Yard. He believed he was being controlled by electromagnetic waves. He had carved into his weapon, my ELF weapon. At least one station told the truth, And I want to play that for you. I can't actually play the news article, so I'm going to play you the audio. What did they report that Alexis complained of? Let's play it.
Alexis complained to police that a microwave pipe machine sent vibrations into his body. New Court investigators took her report and gave it to local community police.
Wow. Now, wouldn't that be weird if he had vibrations and artificial tinnitus? Wouldn't that be strange? One of the first signs that people are being targeted with this technology is back pain or muscle pain and spasms, cramps, things like that. Well, let's check this out.
The Department of Veterans Affairs also revealed that Alexis was on partial disability for orthopedic issues and ringing in his ears.
So, orthopedic issues and ringing in his ears and vibrations. He was targeted 100% back in 1977. He probably would have thought this was all demonic, but people are aware now. He complained about this for a long time before he ended up going to the naval yard and doing what he did. Stupidly, but doing what he did. James Holmes, the Aurora, Colorado /Batman shooter. Holmes began to hear ferocious banging on his bedroom walls, which he called nail ghosts. Really? Really? That's how it started, and he ended up hearing flat-out voices that he thought were coming from the TV. Holmes' public defenders said he was suffering from schizophrenia, that he had long heard voices in his head commanding him to kill, and that he was not in control of his actions or what he perceived to be reality. Commanding him to kill. What is different from what he was hearing and David Berkowitz? Absolutely nothing. Now, he heard those noises in his walls, the cracking, the banging. I've already taken those sound bites from other people and proven that they were MIDI snare sounds, snare and hi-hat sounds that had been warped, altered, sped up, and then sent into their residence to sound like banging and cracks in the walls. And all it was a MIDI snare and hi-hat sound. Now, you may be asking, what is the point of all this? What does it do? What it does is it keeps the person up for weeks on end. It freaks them the hell out. They have no idea what's going on. They are completely bewildered by what is going on around them. They can't sleep. They can't rest. This encompasses them 24 hours a day. They can't get away from it. And the whole time they start hinting at who is doing it to them. Who is doing it to them? And there is where you get your Manchurian. So let's say that they start hinting around that they have this whole system set up in a school, or they are demons that are living underneath the basement of a church. I'm just making these things up, but this is how it works. They convince this person that these are the people doing it, and eventually they snap because it is so bewildering having this technology used on them. It is so mind-blowing that they can't get away from it. It has to be somebody doing it, and they believe it has to be somebody close to them with the multiple voices on the other end. And this is exactly what they could have done to David Berkowitz. They convinced him that he was a team of Satanists. So there's real life. You have David Berkowitz doing his initiations into his little satanic thing that he had going on. Or he did the initiations via audio weapon. So he believed that he was making a pact with the devil when he was really making a pact with a bunch of operators. David Berkowitz didn't have to do this alone, but there's a 99.999% chance that the people he was doing it with were not the people that he believed he was doing it with. This isn't hard to understand once you understand the technology. The hard part is, just like David Berkowitz said, it is very, very hard to understand until it happens to you, until these sound weapons are used on you. And then suddenly you have an understanding of how this could happen to somebody. You have to understand that. It's imperative that you understand that. Imagine a voice that you cannot get away from 24 hours a day, especially somebody like David Berkowitz, who was inviting it in. They're expecting something paranormal, and then this stuff happens. I'm not saying that David Berkowitz didn't meet with people in real life and mess with Satanism. What I'm saying is this is how they blend reality into non-reality. They can come to him via sound weapon at night, claiming to be Sam Hain and the rest of his devil friends looking for trouble, and he would believe it. And you're not quite sure of the direction that they're even coming from. They don't have a direction to them. They sound like they could be coming from the walls. They sound like they could be coming from the floor, from the ceiling. It is the weapon of weapons. This is the weapon of mass destruction. Jason Dalton was the Kalamazoo shooter who was an Uber driver and believed that his Uber app took him over because it started talking to him via voice weapon. This is the same thing as James Holmes. This is the same thing as Aaron Alexis. And this is the same thing as David Berkowitz. These are all the results of the Berkowitz beta test. All of them. The Boston bomber, Tamerlan Tsarnaev, if that's how you pronounce his last name, he feared voices in his head. The FBI repeatedly visited him, and he had 3 people that were talking to him and constantly putting him down. Now think about this. I'm going through every event in pop culture history here. Every one. I've been keeping up with this one for years. This Toronto woman started emailing people and asking them, can you direct me to somebody that is schooled in biotechnology and tell me what's happening? She said she was being sent messages and voices and noises were haunting her basically. And she said, I don't want you to think I'm cuckoo, she told the jury. She's not mentally ill, she insisted. She's being controlled, likely by a mechanism implanted in her skin. When they say mind controlled, you're not mind controlled like a zombie. You're being tormented to do something. And that's usually how it works. They'll tell people, hey, if you kill your grandma or if you go kill this person, we will stop the torture. And after people have been tortured with this for months and months and months, sometimes they are willing to go against their better judgment and do it to possibly stop the torture. Of course, it doesn't stop, but sometimes they take the risk just to try to get relief. So here's another one that is usually well hidden. A lot of people don't know about this one, but it just keeps going. Cho, the Virginia Tech shooter, targeted, completely and totally targeted. I won't even get into the details of this one. You can go back and do it yourself if you're interested in it. This is just one more. Popular culture, every single one. In fact, every single one except for Sandy Hook. The Las Vegas incident. Stephen Paddock said CIA could hack his brain and take over. So do you understand what I'm telling you with this? David Berkowitz was a beta test. Butch DeFeo was a beta test. When Butch DeFeo heard his family plotting against him, those are the same things that Myron May heard. Myron May was a prosecutor. He was a prosecuting attorney who suddenly found himself targeted with this stuff and ended up going to Florida State University and shooting people. He made complaints after complaints about this for years, which started off with back pain, buzzing in his ears, all that shit. And eventually made videos talking about it. And he wasn't talking about just stalking and all that shit that they allude to. He was being electronically attacked. They try to change it and pepper it up so that you don't understand fully that every single one of these that happens in popular culture Everyone has been hit with this technology. Gavin Long, the Baton Rouge shooter, he was targeted with this technology. Name one that happened in popular culture that didn't have to do with this other than Sandy Hook. Nicholas Cruz, the Parkland shooting, told a detective that a demon voice came to him in Dollar Tree and told him to burn, kill, and destroy the night before the Parkland shooting. If you think these people are all just making this shit up to get like a lighter sentence, you are high off your ass. Berkowitz was a beta test. Patrick O'Brien from Tampa, Florida, who is the guitarist from Cannibal Corpse, if you remember Cannibal Corpse. He called his relatives warning about the rapture and that aliens have landed. He was hit with this technology. So many people were hit with this technology. Eileen Warnos, the female serial killer, was hit with this technology. You can look up videos where she complains about it in prison right before she died. This goes on and on and on, and it just blows my mind that people won't wake the fuck up and realize what is going on. There isn't mass psychosis. If you believe that, there's something wrong with you. Nothing should be any different than it was 80 years ago. So what are you going to blame it on? It is just mind-blowing to me that you can see the beta tests and the beta tests going on and then see as it gets weaponized and it gets normalized, and then as it starts to subvert actual science and psychology and psychiatry and medicine and all these different things, and then when it's normalized, then it's weaponized. This is why they love paranormal shows. This is why they love alien and UFO shows, because they hide this technology within all of that. And it broke my heart when I realized that the paranormal was 95% bullshit. Modern paranormal events are 95% bullshit. It is all this technology. The waves are everywhere. They ride on noise. So if they ride on noise and a dog is continuously barking, you can begin to understand why somebody like David Berkowitz would hear what he was hearing. Not to mention the voices and the sounds being sent directly into his home. Now let's go over some quotes by Berkowitz. Crazy people are always crazy. There's always something wrong with them. People can go back to their childhoods and go, yeah, that dude was a little bit off. He was always a little bit off. Just because David Berkowitz had ADHD or whatever as a kid, hyperactivity, does not make him crazy. He cites that a lot, but I believe that to be part of his conditioning, what he believes the technology actually was, and he was thinking that he was softening himself up for demonic attack. But you don't go from crazy to being totally articulate and able to communicate and get your points across. People that are scattered and schizophrenic, that are truly scattered and schizophrenic, will always be scattered and schizophrenic. So let's check out some quotes by David Berkowitz.
Yeah, right. My communication with demons back and forth, which I was under a spell. And again, it's not to make any excuse for anything, but that's the way the state of my mind was at the time.
So he was talking about communication with demons back and forth. So he was having this two-way conversation with demons and his satanic buddies. Let me play this one for you, where they ask him if he was hearing voices.
Did you hear voices? After some rituals and initiations and things that I went through, I began to experience audio-visual things that began to change and so forth.
Audio-visual things that began to change. So what he's telling you, and I bet if you explained it to him, he would agree with you, that this was riding on noise. He would be listening to the TV, and he would hear these voices within the TV. He would hear it within white noise. He would hear it over a blender. He would hear it over a washer or dryer, an air conditioner. He would hear it over a dog barking. Now here's the demons, and I believe being under hypnotic control.
Made up. I mean, there was an actual demon by the name of Sam Hain that I was communicating with. I regret to say that sounds very dumb, but at the time I really believed that stuff, you know, and I was really brainwashed, and I believe I was under a degree of hypnotic control. This is not to make an excuse for anything, but
So he believes that he was under hypnotic control, and he was speaking to these demons, and these voices can sound demonic. I will play you recordings that sound demonic, all right? But they are not demons. These are operators on the other end trying to create Manchurians. Now, this is where David explains that there wasn't a dog, there was a demon.
But really it was confusion to begin with, because there really wasn't a dog, it was a demon.
Okay, so it was a demon. So what he is getting at in these, where he kind of beats around the bush about it, because he's come to understand through all these years that when you try to explain it to people, they can't understand it. And most people can't, just like they can't understand targeting until it happens to them. And what is going on is he was hearing these voices riding over noise. I have said for years that this rides on noise. Let me play this quote.
Berkowitz told his examiners he'd been driven by demons.
Yeah, Berkowitz told his examiners he had been driven by demons.
Sam Hain, Samhain, was the deity that was communicating with me.
Right. So, imagine the power that they have, where they have this guy that just made a pact with the devil. And in 77, this technology would totally and completely appear demonic. A lot of people now, when they're hit with it, figure it out pretty damn quickly. But even the sounds that people hear that are clearly technology sounds could be mistaken for demonic sounds back then, because they didn't know what these sounds sounded like. We have modems and fax machines and things that make noises that are very, very similar to the sounds that you hear, you know, bouncing off the walls, sounds that you can record. And imagine back then how overwhelming it would be. And you have no answers, you have no internet, you have no nothing, you are just alone. You may be wondering, like, okay, well, what do one of these demon voices sound like? Well, once in a while, when you're recording, this sound will jump up. And it jumps and it rides on noise. Whether you turn on a vacuum cleaner, a blender, turn on your sink, your shower, flush a toilet, whatever. In this case, this was from years ago. I had a recorder going in my house, and I went out and was working in the garage, and I came in, and I used the bathroom, and I flushed the toilet, and on my way out, I'm walking out, you can hear my boots, thump, thump, thump. Then you'll hear this corny demon voice come in, but in 1977, or to Nicholas Cruz, a teenager, it could have been pretty realistic. But let me play it for you, and you will hear one of these alleged demon voices. So it does this corny demon laugh, and then it says something that I really can't discern what it says. I used to try to guess at it, but it really doesn't matter. What matters is that it's there. So I'll loop it for you. So that could be mistaken as a demon voice to somebody, right? I mean, to me it was cheesy and it was a really stupid thing, but I couldn't hear it walking out. I didn't hear this. I only heard it on the recording, on the playback. And I was like, wow, that was really, really loud. But these are things that these people are hearing. They're sensitized to this. And if you want to get into that, that is a completely another hour, 2 hours at least worth of explaining that you can find in my other videos. But this is what they are hearing, the types of voices. And you can understand after hearing it how somebody might think it's demonic. Somebody might say, well, how do you know that's not really a demon? And I'm going to tell you right now, when you study this long enough and you go through this audio for hundreds and thousands of hours, and you catch Morse code, you catch sounds that sound like broken fax machines, sounds that sound like 90s modems, this pinging, this technology, it becomes very, very apparent that this is technology being used in hopes that somebody starts to hear it. Another one starts to hear it, and it will create quote unquote mental illness. When you've heard this enough, you understand that it is technology. It has nothing to do with ghosts and ghoulies, aliens, all of it. This is the same stuff that they use to scare people off path when they're out in the middle of the wilderness and get them lost, and they become missing 411 people. I'm not saying that every missing 411 case is this technology specifically, but all the ones where they believe that somebody is chasing them, this is it. Because I do analyzation of audio and forensic audio, I decided to start looking into dogs barking on YouTube. And on May 26th of 2021, this is like a godsend, somebody posts this video. It says, I won't name their name yet unless they want me to. It says, we live in the middle of nowhere. Why are there dogs barking? And WTF was in the grass. So I listened to it and I went, wow, it really does sound like there's dogs barking in the middle of nowhere. I decided to really get into the audio. And I want to show you this real quick, get in and out. But David Berkowitz and this whole dog thing, I believe he said, hey, there wasn't a dog barking, because he eventually said that to people because they wouldn't understand what he meant by that, and that the demon sounds were riding on the dog barking. I want to show you this because there is what sounds like a dog barking in it, because they have these wind chimes going and things in their area, which is creating these other sounds. Now this should blow your mind. This is the spot that they're referring to in the video. And if you listen, you can hear what sounds like dogs barking, but they're not. Listen. You can also hear what sounds like a voice right there. But here's the dogs right here. Let's give it a whirl. Now let's listen to this in phases, and let me show you how the sound shifts and changes. Check this out. Now let's loop that. It goes by really quick. Now those were the dogs, what sounded like dogs barking. Listen to this. Now let's listen to another version of that. Whoa! A little bit different, huh? Check that out. It almost sounds like it says, what are you doing? But that's not a dog. So you have this thing, this sound that sounds like dogs barking. But as I analyze the audio, this was just uploaded. It's a godsend. What sounds like dogs barking is not dogs barking at all. Let's listen to this version. Now that is strange. Was David Berkowitz hearing that, which actually sounds like dogs barking, but isn't, and is actually just audio? And to him, he was hearing the voices within it. You can be sensitized to hear the voices within it. Now let's go back. That's this. Dogs. Sounds like dogs, right? Check this out. The sound goes from sounding so far away to almost right up against the microphone. Now here's the last version. Now listen to the whole thing. Now listen to that. That is a human voice. It's all human voice. But listen. Sounds like somebody talking over a walkie-talkie. But what started out sounding like dogs are not dogs at all. Fact. Now imagine thinking you're hearing dogs barking, but over a few days, as it incessantly goes on and you hone in on the sound, it begins to change and sound like a human voice. You may be asking yourself, what's going on here? Well, I've said a million times, this rides on noise. That's a fact. So what's going on is these wind chimes mixed with the wind and everything else are creating the frequencies for this to ride on. What can also do that is a hum and other appliance sounds in the background that you don't even notice that can bring these up and into a level that can be heard by the human ear. Now this person was literally hearing them. That's why they went out with their camera. They were in the middle of nowhere and they were hearing dogs barking. They weren't dogs. And just for the hell of it, I found another dogs barking video, snagged it. This is what I started off with. Then, stage 2. Now this is where it starts to get a little weird. Check this out. And this begins to resemble the modem sounds that I talked about. In dogs barking. Check this out. Now check this out. In a dog barking. So, can people be fooled by sound riding on sound and be tricked into believing all sorts of things? Absolutely. I wish Maury Terry was alive, because I would be beating down his door, demanding that he listen to what I have to say the same way he beat down other people's doors, to make sure they listened to what he had to say. Because the dude was just amazing, and more people need to understand this. And if I could have explained this to him, he would have totally got an understanding of this. Were the Carr brothers and other people involved with this stuff as operators? Quite possibly. And it's quite possible that that's why they got whacked. One of the Carr brothers was at an Air Force base in Minot, North Dakota. Alright, the Air Force and the Navy were the first people to experiment with this stuff. The very first people. Was he somehow involved, somehow an operator? Quite possibly. I would like more details on the Carr brothers to figure this out. Because when you put it all together, Berkowitz was a beta test and a patsy. I want you to listen to this quote that Maury Terry got from Sons of Sam. It's important.
That was all part of like apocalyptic trials, intensifying acts of random organized violence, form of terrorism. Yeah, exactly.
That is what they're doing right now. Acts of organized random violence. The kind of violence where you scratch your head and you're like, wow, there's no motive, there's no nothing. All they have done is normalized it. That's it. Here's another quote from David Berkowitz that's pretty important. He's reading out of a book, and it's a conversation that he had with his sister, and it's about him. Check it out.
Who is out to get you? He said, people, just people. I think my phone is bugged. I even think they bugged my car. They're out to get me. They're going to get me. Again, I asked who, what makes you say this? Just people, just people. And he said, that's me talking, that I have to go now.
So, before all this stuff started happening to him, he thought his car and his house was bugged. That is how they gather intel and information on people to build up a profile to begin targeting. If he had rituals going on in his apartment, which he did, stuff like that, was talking out loud to people, this is how it starts. This is really, really important. This is from the Sons of Sam.
A bunch of kids messing around in the woods. Can be very good foot soldiers for a large network.
Can be very good foot soldiers for a large network. You're goddamn right they can. And they still are today. That's what's going on. Now, if you go back and remember that I talked about the blurring of reality and not reality, and how they do this with sound weapons with an isolated person, I want you to hear this quote. This is very important.
I think it was just a game in the beginning, with druid ceremonies and whatever, and there wasn't anything that was that serious, okay? Somewhere along the line, somebody got to the head of this thing and took it in a completely different direction.
Somebody got to the head of this thing and took it in a completely different direction. They all thought that somebody higher up, somebody with more power, got involved with this thing and subverted it. This is what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is what happened. They are telling the truth. They just don't understand how it happened. When they would go to question people, a lot of these people would be completely paranoid, saying that there are people after me, there are people out to get me, and would end up dead a couple days later. There are very, very real things that people are complaining about now that actually happened during this whole Son of Sam, David Berkowitz operation. Here is a quote from David Berkowitz. Check this out.
There was another group, a more elite group, hidden into it and woven into it,
So, there it is there. And then, here's a great quote from Berkowitz. And he's talking about how there are other sons out there. Now, if you go through Berkowitz's letters, all the letters that he allegedly wrote, they're all in quotes. These are quotations. Look at the letters. They're in quotes. He is not saying this. Other people are. He is quoting what he is hearing from these sound weapons. Now, check this out.
People want my blood, but they don't want to listen to what I have to say. This is all a plot. There are other sons out there. God help the world.
There are other sons out there. They are telling you that there are other experimentees out there. That's what they were telling him in a roundabout way, because they mix truths with lies and they fuck with you. What he means is there are other brainwashed mofos out there that are doing this stuff, that are being manipulated by these weapons. This is what happened to him. And now here is the kicker. They made it look so crazy and they spun it so far out of control. What is the first thing that people do when they start being hit with sound weapons? They start tearing their house apart because they believe that there's a baby monitor or some type of FM device hidden somewhere in their house trying to drive them crazy. They believe it's technology most of the time. He thought his house was bugged at first, then it became demons. Do you see how it evolved? He knocked a hole in his wall looking for the device because at first he probably thought it was behind the mirror. And then we have this hole, which is very important because it says, "My name is Mr. Williams and I live in this hole." What he's telling you with this is where the voice of Mr. Williams was coming out of. I have several children who I'm turning into killers. I have several children who I'm turning into killers because that's what they told him. All that stuff that he wrote were quotes. Go look at the letters again. Look at the quotations. Look at this. Sound weapons, 80% of the time, sound like they're coming from in the walls. It's just the way the sound works. It's not in their heads. It sounds like it's coming from the walls. Read the stories about Aaron Alexis and watch videos. Same thing. Same thing with James Holmes. Same thing. And they always say in their head. No, it wasn't in their head. It was in their area for most of them. Some people get it right to their skull, but most don't. Most of it sounds like it's coming from in the walls or around them. He was a beta test. He was a beta test that did the same thing that any sane person would do and start assuming that it was technology at first and start knocking holes in their walls looking for it. Almost everybody that is attacked with this tech does the same thing. James Holmes did the same thing, tore his apartment up. Then when he believed that he thought people were coming into it, he booby-trapped it. But he was such a crazy killer that he warned the police that his apartment was booby-trapped before they went into it. Does that make any sense to you at all? Because it shouldn't. And if it does, there's something wrong with you. Before the late 60s and early 70s, there is none of this stuff. None of it. It has progressively gotten worse and worse and worse as technology progresses. John Linley Frazier, Butch DeFeo, David Berkowitz were all beta tests. That's from 69, 70 to 77. And then it slowly gained speed. And now it's used every year. You name an event that happened in pop culture history in the last 16 years, besides the only one I don't have proof on is Sandy Hook. Besides that, all of them, 100% of them, were hit with this technology. It's not a mental health crisis. It's a electromagnetic radio frequency crisis. That's what this is. And I think I've shown you just enough proof within this video to get your mind going. If you want to get further into it, go through my older videos and check them out. Do you remember David Crowley, the guy who tried to make the movie Gray State? Even his family was targeted with this technology. They believed they were under demonic attack and his wife was hearing voices in their house. I was the one that tipped the online investigators off into this technology under another YouTube name because I didn't want to use mine at the time. This technology is being used in every single tragedy that is happening around this country and around the world. Thanks for watching. Look out for Charlie.